Um, we can start admitting them now, Fatima. Hello. Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Please, while we wait for others to join, kindly fill the poll on your screen. I believe you can see the poll. Kindly just fill the poll. The poll would help us better your experience with us here. So I believe you can all see the poll. So everyone that has joined currently should please fill the poll. Thank you. While we wait for others to join, we'll start the next 5 minutes. Thank you. Once again, welcome. Please, while we wait for others to join and start, there's a poll on our screen. Let us ensure that we fill the poll. So far, of the 12 participants, only 3 has filled it. Please, as soon as you're done filling it, just go to the chat box and write done. Thank you. So just go to the chat box. As soon as you're done filling it, just go there and say done. So we know you're through. We're starting in the next 3 minutes. Okay. Good evening once again, everyone. We are starting now, but it happens that only 6 of the 15 people here have filled, have submitted to the survey. So should I give you one more minute? It seems 1 or 2 more people are filling currently. So I'll just give it a minute more to see if we get more responses. Please, let's do that quickly. Let's do that quickly so we can start. Okay, okay. 42% of the participants so far. Yes, let's do that quickly. Let's do that quickly. So the 19 people here only have 6. Okay. Thank you so much for those who had filled the form. We start now. I believe you can all see my screen. So my name is Abola Promise Abayomi. I'm the Research and Economics Officer at Tongston Entrepreneurship Holdings, and I'll be your host for today. Thank you for joining us for the second part of the series, The Ultimate Guide to Accessing Funds for a Business of Passion in Africa. And the next few minutes, I want to talk about Tongston Entrepreneurship Holdings, what we do, who we are, our vision, and our mission. So Tongston is a leading award-winning unique Pan-African group focused on entrepreneurial thinking through education, business, finance, media, to achieve sustainable social, economic development. Our vision is to see communities in Nigeria and Africa where there is no unemployment, unemployability, underemployment, or overdependence on government for socio-economic development. And we intend to achieve this by making institutions of learning, or institutions generally, entrepreneurial institutions, educators, entrepreneurial educators, and student entrepreneurial learners. At Tongston, we believe that education should be at the forefront of every intervention or solution. Please, if you can hear me, just to say you can hear me, just say hi in the chat box. Let me be sure I'm not just talking to myself. Let me just say hi quickly in the chat box. Yeah, okay. So we believe that education should be at the forefront of every intervention. Yeah, thank you. I can see. Thank you, Fatima. So we believe education should be at the forefront of every intervention, either to or solution to education, to business, to enterprise, to government, or any solution at all, but not just any kind of education. We talk about entrepreneurial education. The goal of entrepreneurial education is to instill in the learners entrepreneurial thinking, the skill, the knowledge, and the attitude to actually drive personal business, enterprise, or socioeconomic development. Just to give context to that quickly before we move on, is to say, for example, if we take entrepreneurial education to an institute of learning, like a university, and then you enroll the school, now the institution, beginning from the administrators in entrepreneurial education, then you will instilling in them the skill, the knowledge, and the attitude to create influence, to create value, and to be profitable. So they begin to think and act in ways of how do I create the necessary influence. For example, some weeks ago, in the world record of universities, Nigeria, the best university in Nigeria, which is the University of Oyo, came 1,172 in the world. So the administrators of any university in Nigeria who have been enrolled in entrepreneurial education will begin to think, how do we create a brand, an influence that everywhere in the world everywhere in the world will be recognized, that we can compete with the best in the world. They begin to think, how do we create influence? How do we create value, right? Value that the government cannot ignore. The government just would invest in us because we have the right value. The value, how do we create value for our communities? How do we create value for our customers, the parents and the students? And then for the educators who are being enrolled in entrepreneurial education, they'll be thinking, how do I create value? How do I create influence? How do I become profitable? Not just for my personal development, but for the development of the learners under me. And the students, the learners too, will be thinking, how do I use the resources that I've been given to become to develop myself both personally and then to develop either my business or my enterprise. So entrepreneurial education is something everyone needs. Everyone needs. You're a businessman, you work in the government, you're an administrator, because it puts in us what's the skill, the knowledge, and attitude to drive personal and socio-economic development. Okay, so Tongston Entrepreneurship Holdings, we have 5 arms, you could call it that, all stemming from one, the Tongston Holding, and then we have the Tongston College, the Tongston Media, the Tongston Institute, and the Tongston Venture. A link will be shared with you after now. So please go to our website and learn more about Tongston and how you can leverage on what we do for your personal and social economic development, or even the development of your business. So at Tongston, we actually partner with a lot of people to achieve what we do, including NTA, including Business Day, and many others. Like I said, the link will be shared with you. Our members and affiliation include the Abuja Chambers of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, International Council of Small Business, and many more. We're also a data-driven organization, so we actually collect data from a lot of places to drive the experience of our customer, to ensure that our customer have the best experience while partnering and leveraging on us. So we collect data from quite a lot of places that includes Stitch Plus, Google, Router, and many others. So like I said, Tongston has a lot of products and services that speaks directly to everybody, to you either as an entrepreneur or a business owner, someone, a career person, a child, a mother, a father, an administrator. We have so many products and services that speaks to you. So that is why you should click on the link, go to our website, and find out how you can leverage on what we do for your personal development and the development of your business. Without further ado, I want to dive quickly into what we're doing today, into the second part of the webinar. Last week, we had Mrs. Fatima Abba, and who is an expert in the field of finance, and she talked about how we can create the funds, get the funds we need for our business and passion. One thing that stood out for me particularly was that she said that we need to create value. We need to create value to attract the funds that we need. You need to create value to attract the funds you need. Value will not just, funds will not just come from anywhere, right? The more value you create rather, the more funds you can actually access to develop the values you have created. And now that we know how to create the values, right? We know how to rather now get to the funds. What next do we do? We want to ask ourselves, how do we survive your first funding? Now that the fundings are here, how do you survive that first funding? We have many questions we'll be asking today. We want to understand, how do we manage our finances, your personal finance, your business finance, the organization, the finance of your institute. We want to know what tools you need to use to actually manage those finances when they do come in. And to take us on this journey is no other than Engineer Bello Tongo. He's the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Tongston Entrepreneurship Groups. He has 14 years Over 14 years is professional experience in entrepreneurship education, construction, mentoring, and business. He's a top visionary in education, as conferred by him by Global Forum for ED Education. Mr. Bello, we are very glad to have you here. If you would, please take the floor. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Promise. I hope my audio is clear. I'm a bit under the weather, so I may be coughing once in a while as I speak. So thank you for having me here. And I was a participant in the last session that you had with Ms. Salima Abba, and also the corporate account officer from Stanbic, where you guys talked about the different financing options. So I think it's only natural that, yes, after that last session, right now you have acquired the finance, whether it's through the bank and all their different instruments. Now, what do you do? And I shall be speaking also based on our own experience at Tongston, and also how we have seen other enterprises doing, as well as how we advise other startups that have come through our incubation processes in terms of accessing finance, but also, as you said, from the 3 questions that you put forward, managing those finances. First, just before I go through these points that I've summarized in the slide here that you are displaying, is to also say that first, if there are any questions also, please do let me know and be interjecting hopefully at the right time, so that I make sure that we make use of the 1 hour as best as possible. Because sometimes I may go over certain things and then people will be left behind and all of that. So I give you permission to interject and ask any questions, please, whether in the chat box or through audio by you, Promise. And number 2 is to say that before I go through these main points also, is that from our experience, the source of that funding is very much important as to how that funding is managed. And what do I mean by that? Typically, as you know, in the space of MSMEs or startups and things like that, the main means of access that people usually think about is the banks. And what banks give you are typically loans to set up your businesses or to do certain things, certain projects within that business. Reason why I'm saying it's important that the source is the right source is because even with Tongston, our experience has been always seeking for funding from people who are not just having the economic means to back our projects or our company, but also have interest in it. And that interest is very important because it's important that you are not put under pressure as much as, as soon as you get that funding, basically, which is something that cripples so many businesses, even here in Nigeria and other parts of the continent. But getting that funding from somebody who has an interest beyond just making profit or making returns from the investment that they make is very important. That's why I say this is something that's very important to address, because it's not just anybody that has the money to give you, but it's also somebody that has interest or passion in what you are doing and the thing that you're trying to achieve. Those are the kind of people that you should get on board, because rough times will come, obviously, and it's important that the person is in it for the long run, not just for their interest rate of returns that they will get from the money that or from the funding that they have given you. I just needed to address that quickly before we go into these main points. To also add to that, the other interesting thing which many people don't do, and which is also tied to my first point of finding the right source of funding, is that there's something called a moratorium, of which actually many startups don't consider this when they are seeking for funding. you shouldn't think of it as a situation where, I mean, you shouldn't think of you having funding to launch your business as something that will happen overnight or even within 1 month or 2 months. It's important that as you are getting that funding from the investor or whoever it is, you come to an agreement of that moratorium, as I call it. And what that means is that they basically allow you 6 months to even a year or even 2 years of, let me say, settling in, if I can call it that, into the build-up of the business. Because as you know, in the world of enterprise entrepreneurship, it's not necessarily that in the first year you make your money or even in the second year. Usually it takes like 1, 2 years or 3 years before you balance, if I can call it that, and then scale the profits that you make from your business. So that's why I said that it's important that even if you think, or even if you believe that you will make your money in the first 6 months to a year, still seek for that moratorium from that investor or that funding provider, which is why I said my first point of saying that it's important that you are in bed, if I can call it that, with the right person, not that they are only interested in making money out of the investment that they've made for, in your business. So that is like a preamble to what I'm going to address in these 6 points or 5 points on the slide. So I hope that aspect is clear, which is that the person should have interest beyond the money that they're going to make out of the investment or the funding that they're giving you. But number two, they should be allowed to give, they should be willing to give you a 1 year or 2 year moratorium space to actually launch and start making money or returns or an operation before they start seeking for their interest returns or whatever thing that they want to get out of the money, the funding that they have given you. So that is out of the way. Now to our main points here. As you know, the funding side of things, or let me say money side of things, is tied to the profitability arm of Tongston's TED model. And so, which is what Promise mentioned earlier, that the TED model is about value, influence, and profitability. And so, which is why I've underlined profitability there, because that is where the funding actually is tied to. But as he said also in the introduction, the more value you have, the more influence you have, the more profitability you will have. Typical example of this is, as you know, Dangote, who is the richest man in Africa, biggest industrialist. A few years ago, when he was, this I read somewhere in one of the journals, that a few years ago when he wanted to launch the project, or to kickstart the project of the refinery that he's currently about to finish, I believe. So many financiers that gave him the money were so much almost like fighting each other to give him that money and that funding. And why was that? This was this happened typically because of Dangote, his name or the name of his company as a brand, and how much influence he sways. It's not just that, but also it was also tied to the quality of value or product that he has built reputation for. So this is why I'm saying, this is the reason why I said profitability cannot, or funding for profitability cannot just be treated in isolation. It needs to also be looked at from the point of your brand influence and your product value. And this is what people try to always do when they provide in their business plans to show that really there's a market for this product that they are providing, but also that they have built enough of attention around their brand or influence, if I can call it that, and that they are known, so that whoever is giving you that funding makes sure, or is almost feeling, let me say, feeling safe enough to give you the money for the funding. And then, of course, when you get it, your target or should be to make sure that profitability is something that is at the target of it. Mind you, profitability is not quite profit. Profitability is more of indicators or things that will lead to the actual profit that your business will make, which is why this topic is very important today, in order to really get you to find the right indicators, which will be in the next slide. I will give you each of the different indicators that will make sure that that sense of profitability is on its way, if I can call it that. So that is number one, regarding the tech model, focusing on profitability. Number two, tracking and documentation. Financiers, the people that give you the money, and also after they give you the money, something very important that helps them decide in giving you the money, but also in making sure that they are not really putting you under pressure when you get that money, that funding, is the mechanisms that you put in terms of the tracking and documentation of every money that goes in and out of the company. Now, what do I mean by that? This is something beyond just the financial statements of your enterprise that you have built. Is very much tied to also accounting and the treasury side of the business. It's something that also we did in Tongston. And these days, there are so many, I can call it, so many tools of the accounting and also documentation of money coming in and out of the enterprise. Is also something of value, not just to the people that are giving you the funding, but it's also for your own sake. Because, you know, money is almost like a way to quantify business performance. So even if it's not for the outside world who has given you the money or the funding for this enterprise that you're operating, it's also for the sake of your own analytics, if I can call it that, you knowing how well your business is doing on a month-by-month basis and on a year-by-year basis. So that tracking and documentation needs to happen, especially, as I said, monthly and annually. Some people even go to the level of doing it weekly and daily, for instance. But typically the rule of thumb is that you do it monthly, you do it quarterly, and then you do it annually. And then, of course, after the annual, you do it after every 5 years to see the growth projection and also how the business is performing. So tracking and documentation, very important. The other reason why it's important also is because of taxes and also your company annual returns that you do every year. Many businesses fail in this sense because at the start of it, and even Tongston, actually, even our company also, we experienced something similar to that. It's just that we were quick to sort of fix it before the financial year elapsed, if I can call it that. Many entrepreneurs or businesses go into a situation where money is coming either directly from the pocket of the owner and not being tracked or being aligned to what the business needs are. But also sometimes even money comes out of the business account or the company account without being tracked and being filed in terms of how or what really the money is being used for. So, and this is all the way down to things like invoicing, receipts, and also what is this word? There's a word for it typically, but tracking of payroll, for instance, your monthly payroll that you issue to staff and other expenses that you do even to vendors and things like that. This is something that many startups, typically, and many businesses and many companies fail at because it's so mundane and it's very much paperwork, basically. Nobody wants to come and be tracking receipts and things like that, but it's very, very, very important, especially if at all, as you get your first funding, you're going to seek for other means of funding because it may be, you may reach a situation where, or a time where the 10 million naira that you've collected from maybe, let me say, Stanbic Bank, for instance, is something that you're using immediately for a particular thing, but in the next year, some other project comes up, and you don't have almost like, you don't have if I can say, maybe you don't, you have probably maxed out your access or the funding that that bank wants to offer you, and then you go to another bank. They also would want to see what really you have used this first money that you got from other financiers. So it's very, the point I'm trying to make here is that everything that really comes in and has been spent, whether it's at the level of too much expenses and is not making making enough profit, or is at the level of even making profit, it needs to be documented and tracked with dates and receipts or documentation, if I can say that. So this number two, the second point, tracking and documentation, something that definitely is a loophole that many people don't do, and it, as I said, not just affects them negatively by them not really knowing how their business is performing numerically, but also it affects them getting other means of funding from other institutions or other banking or financiers. Item 3, let me move to the third point here, which is network leverage. Typically, when it comes to even personal finance, but also business finance, the 3 rules are usually make it, keep it, and max it. So this is in terms of money. You must first make it, ensure that you keep it or keep as much as possible, and then you max it to as higher of a level as possible. Now with network leverage, or if I can say leveraging on your network, this is something that we have also experienced, but also I've seen many other companies taking this taking advantage of this, if I can say that. And what does this mean? It means if you get that 10 million naira, for example, tied to my earlier example from Stanbic, for instance, it doesn't mean that all of that 10 million naira is what you are. It doesn't mean basically that all of that 10 million naira must be used for what that item that you have indicated is for. Now, what do I mean by that? It means you probably have gotten 10 million naira, and 2 million naira out of it, maybe you want to use it for office rent. However, this was the plan, your business plan, but then something comes your way, which is that among your network, you have a friend that is, or even in your own home or somewhere else that you already have existed, a space has come where the requirement is just 1 million naira for a co-working space, for instance. But in your financial plan, you put there is 2 million naira that you need out of that 10 million naira for that office space. So what I mean by network leverage is that you having this connection with this person who has another office space of 1 million naira is something that you can almost, let me say, take advantage of, so that you actually are making savings of 1 million naira out of that 2 million naira that you can use for other things. So this is what I mean, what I meant by the fact that it was 2 million naira budgeted for an office space. It doesn't mean you should stop at it and not go seeking for even better deals or better leverage, if I can call it that, to acquire that office space. And that way, the keeping it here, which is what I said, make it, keep it, max it, keeping as much as possible happens, basically, which is almost kind of like saving. So this is what I mean. And even with Tongston, to give an example, many of the things that we did when we were starting up as a company, it was just leveraged through the network of people that we have. Typically things that we would have, even the investment, the startup capital, or some of the equity startup capital that came into Tongston in the first, from day one when we launched, it came from friends and family, if I can call it that, or a network of people that we know who will typically give you that amount of money, whether it's 5 million naira, 10 million naira, 20, 30, without putting the pressure that you would have from a bank. If it was a bank that puts that money into that business, then it comes with so much pressure, and also they expect certain returns. So as much as possible, leveraging on your network is something that I think you can do, not just for the sake of fundraising, but also, as I said, when you get that first funding, making sure that you don't just waste it or exhaust it in the things that you have planned for. And always, even in fact, it's normally a rule of thumb, I think, even with your personal finance, that you should always keep an eye open for any way that you can almost leverage on other resources or other people's money. In personal finance training, you always say OPM, other people's money, but I like to say other people's resources. So it's not only money, it can be resources such as space, equipment, even people, their intellect also, and etc. So that is what point 3 had to do. That's what point 3 was about. On the maxing it, in point 3, I will speak about it later because it's tied to one of the other points below. So point 4, this is almost like my general rule of thumb, and the 50%, 35%, 15% budgeting. In mathematics or in ratio, you can call it as a 10-7-3, 10 ratio 10-7-3, basically in mathematical terms, but in percentage terms, which is easier to understand. What I mean by this is that as you get your funding, or even before you get the funding, and you are just trying to budget for what this money will be used for, this is my own rule. But as I said, for you, depending on what industry you're in, it may change a bit. But scale-wise, I think it needs to be in this big, medium, and small, which is 50, 35, 15. 50% of it always we do in Tongston, even right from the point of startup of budgeting and launching the company up till now, when we're doing annually and even quarterly, as we're budgeting for different things, we always put 50% of it goes to operations, or basically keeping the operation and keeping the company and business going. So staff salary, etc., things like that, inventory, stuff like that, basically. 50% is what it takes, but as much as possible, as you know, of course, the smaller the better. But it never should go beyond that 50% of the money that you have budgeted for the month or for the quarter or for the year. For the 35%, that is allocated to enterprise VIP. Now, VIP means value, influence, and profitability, which is tied to the TED model. What this means is that after the operations, after enterprise operations, 50% of money has gone to that. The next 35, we invest in the company. But how do we invest in the company? We invest in anything that will improve or increase the value of our products, the influence of our brand as Tongston, and also the profitability of the company. So this is what I mean by the 35% goes to VIP. And as I said earlier, these 3 arms is what the Tongston thinking model is all about. Most companies, they do best, they grow and they do best according to how high their value is, how influential their brand is, and also how profitable the business is. And by the way, even think about yourself as a person, because the interesting thing is that many things that we apply in business or in enterprise, you can actually apply to yourself as a person. It's how influential you are as a human being, how valuable you are as a human being, how profitable you are as a human being. This is how you grow, and this is what actually makes people gravitate towards you, but this is also what leads to your success in life. So for the business as well, for the enterprise, how valuable the company is, how influential the company is, and how profitable the company is. This is what really makes it grow and scale to the level of success that you hope to achieve. So this is why 35% of the money that we budget usually typically, or that we source from different arms, whether it's a loan or whatever it is, 35% of it goes to improving these three arms. There are sub-elements normally that indicate your level of value, your level of influence, and your level of profitability. But this is not meant for this particular session. But as I said, just you studying value, influence, and profitability is something that you would know that it's something that will scale your business or your company. So this is why 35% has to go to it. Now, the 15%, which is the final segment of the budgeting, is what we call the enterprise fund. Now, for Tongston and also for many other companies in the world, they have something called, it's just like how in your personal finance you have savings fund. But in this case, it's not just a savings fund or liquid cash that stays for miscellaneous activities. It's also funding that goes into other investment funds. Now, what do I mean by that? This is basically money management 101 in the business world, they call it, which is basically cash shouldn't remain in your accounts. Maybe little should remain for miscellaneous, as I said, day-to-day activities, but it's important that majority of your liquid fund that you have after you've done these other two budgeting goes into vehicles, different vehicles that produce more money. So typically you have assets that are typically maybe tied to the stock market, to real estate, to the financial markets, to the commodities market, to also venture capital funds, also private equity funds, all of these different, even mutual funds that exist for corporate enterprises also exist. And so this is basically you putting your money to work for you, just like how you do for your personal finance. This is what typically you will do for your company also, which is why it's very interesting. As I said earlier, almost everything that you do personally is the same that you can do professionally or for your business or for your enterprise. So this is what the 15% is meant for. And as I said, there are so many different vehicles that you can put this fund into. And these days, even staff within your organizations or just you within your own entity, you can actually create your own type of fund where staff and other people actually put money into, and then you invest it in different other investment vehicles, and then you share the profits, of course. So this is how typically we do it in Tongston, but also I've seen many other companies doing it. As I say, it doesn't have to be exactly that 50, 35, 15% share, but the ratio should kind of mimic this, which is that majority goes to your operations. The medium or the moderate figure goes to your VIP, which is your value, influence, and profitability. And also your 15%, which is the smallest piece of it, goes to liquid, how to improve your liquidity or the cash that you have instead of just laying it in your account doing nothing. Second to the last is assets versus liabilities of people, properties, and place. Now, this is also something that we do in Tongston, and many people also do it in their own companies. And even in your personal life, I'll keep making that reference to your personal life and your personal finance. You can also do the same thing, which is that everything that you do with this funding, with this first funding that you collect, the lens that you look at things, or you look at the allocation of that money, should be assets versus liabilities. So not just in terms of you putting money in people in your property are liability, basically. So let me explain further. Your people, the people side of things is basically your staff, not just your staff, but also consultants and other team members that you work with. So every human being, basically, every person that is within the organization is what the people side of things is. And as I said, some people are assets, some people are liabilities within the organizations. Some staff are assets, some staff are liabilities. There are different ways that we typically use to determine the assets versus liability side of the staff, but also I think except if a question comes up later related to this, then I won't go too much into detail with that. But assets mean everything that help you bring in money to your organization, and liabilities are things that cause you to lose money, basically. So in a nutshell, assets lead to liability. Assets lead to revenue, liabilities lead to expenses. So if you think of the people within your organization, anyone that is basically leading to more liabilities than assets, then you should be worried. Anyone that leads to more assets than liabilities, then yeah, those are good people, if I can call it that, as far as performance is concerned. But this is only tied to the profitability side. Certain people within the organization improve the value of your products and services. Certain people improve the influence side. So those are not quantifiable as far as money is concerned. So this is why, for the sake of this session, as I said, it's tied to profitability. So this is why I'm dimensioning it according to the money side of things. So properties are basically the equipments, the things, the items, objects that you have within the company, from as little as a pen to as big as let me say, computer or a car, even a vehicle that you own. So the same thing too, which of them are assets, which of them are liabilities. Get rid of the liabilities and put more money into the assets. So this is the same principles that you apply in terms of the properties that your company has. Third is the place. Your place is basically your facility or your locations or your offices. Certain locations are assets, certain locations are liabilities. So like for Tongston also, how we have different locations, not just here in Abuja, it's the same way that we allocate or that we use the finances that we have or the funds that we have. We always think of which of our locations is more of an asset to us than a liability. And that is the one that will most likely attract the funding or financing that we put or that we invest in it. And not just that, by the way, even within that entity, within that office that is creating the assets and liabilities, we're always thinking of every square foot within that office, in terms of whether every square foot in the office is an asset or a liability. So even down to that detail of it, everything, every space that is paid for basically has to have a purpose towards the profitability side of things. But this is like on the extreme level. You don't have to go to all the way to that level. But the general rule of thumb is that just the location is enough for you to use in terms of determining which of them is an asset versus a liability. The other one that I mentioned about square foot per, there's a word they call it usually in the financial world, almost like a square foot return or something like that. Meaning what is every square foot space in an office, what is it bringing to you in return, or what is it taking out of you as a liability? So this is what the assets versus liabilities, people, properties, and place aspect is all about. So finally, on the debt versus assets. Now, debt is obviously means you owing money or you've collected money from somebody. There's something called good debt and there's bad debt. Not all debt is bad, basically. But this is very much tied to how you use the debt that you've collected. So this session is about, of course, you have collected the money, right? If that money is debt and you are using it to invest or to spend on assets, then it's a good debt, especially if it's an asset that immediately or almost in the short term leads to cash flow, then it's a good debt. And this is what even the financiers will be looking for. But if the money that you are getting or you are acquiring, you have put it into something that is a liability or something that is not really that much of an asset, like a car, for instance, like a company vehicle, office vehicle, then it's not good use of the debt. So that's why I said there's good debt and there's bad debt. And but it's very much tied to what you do or what you use it for. Using debt to create more assets and revenue is positive. Using debt to spend on liabilities and expenses is definitely not a good use of debt. So debt is always good, as I said. Even countries do the same thing. Companies do the same thing too. I think I read a few weeks ago a story about I'm trying to remember whether it was Facebook or Amazon, that as much as they had, I think it was Facebook, yeah, as much as they had so much of revenue or so much of assets and money or liquid cash, in order to build some of their facilities or some of their locations around the world, they went and seek for debt. And they did that because obviously they have the influence side of things, but also because they know that those entities that they are investing in or that they are using the money for is going to create more money for it. And so that is why even as an MSME or as a small business or small startup, it's the same principles that one should apply. And even for us, we did the same thing also. Every money that, although, by the way, we didn't collect any debt, our own money and investment came from different means. But if we had collected debt, it would have been the same principles that we would apply, meaning we would have put the money into things that are assets, basically, that create revenue, rather than things that are liabilities. So it's the same principles that we apply. So taxes, something about taxes. This is a bit, let me say, dicey, because I know that many startups in Nigeria, especially when they get money or even before they get the money, their approach is always, I don't want to pay taxes, or I don't want to pay this or that. It's understandable, of course, because in certain climes, the environment, just like your personal tax payment, you expect that taxes should be used to further improve the environment that you do your business in. And so that is because you don't see much of that, that affects you, or that affects your willingness to pay those taxes. Is understandable, of course. But what I like to say, or what I like to do, and which is what I've seen happening like with other big companies, is that many of them try to reduce taxes that they pay, or they basically make their financial statements to be in a way that there's not enough taxable money left in the account. And what do I mean by that? If you study accounting or even business finance, you know that the general rule about tax is that the government or the entities, the tax agencies are going to collect your tax based on the profit that you have made after expenses. So what certain companies do is that they make sure that that money that is left as profit, as taxable profit, is as little as possible. So even vehicles and computers and other certain things that they use operationally, they make sure that they get it out of they put it accounting wise, they indicate it to be business expense. So what that means is that after everything is paid for, there basically isn't enough money left, or there's only little money left for the government or the tax agencies to collect from you, basically. There are so many other different ways to go around this issue of taxes, but it's important. Taxes are important to be paid, but as I said, it's a dicey matter, and so that is why I said the best you can do is just minimize, in a good way though, minimize the taxable money that is left in your balance sheet or in your financial statements, so that whatever you are using that money that you have used to reduce those taxable income is of benefit to your company, whether it's a vehicle or a laptop or whatever it is, and that expenses. The other thing that companies do, and even Dangote, I think he does it with his companies here in Nigeria, is that there are certain things called, I've now forgotten the name, but it's a kind of means where you use some of the taxable money that you have for your company or from your financial statements, you use it for public good. So things like roads or even education, hospitals, social amenities, basically. If you use some of those money, whether it's through your CSR or whatever it is, you use it for such ventures or such projects, then government gives you a waiver, basically, in terms of what they would have typically collected from you. Because think about it, the money that they will collect from you, from the taxes, what they'll use for those things, for the roads, for the free education, for the healthcare, and etc. But if you have already taken it upon yourself to execute those projects or those type of assignments on behalf of them, even though it's through your own company, then it's almost like you've done the job for them, and so they waive it for you, basically. So that's another way of handling the taxes, especially through your CSR, or if your CSR is not, or if your company is not in a social type of space, then then of course you pay your taxes. But as I said, as much as possible through your CSR, you can do it, and also through other partnerships that you have with the state or local or even the federal government that you are located in. So I try to go as fast as possible. I hope I've really addressed as much as possible in these 6 points. I think the final slide, if you can move the slide now, is basically tied to what the financial statements, as you know, should almost help you tell about. So here what I've done is I've put, obviously, as you guys know, I hope you know, let me just reiterate, financial statements about your balance sheet, your income statement, which is also called the profit and loss account, and then your cash flow statement. In each of these 3 statements, there are certain figures or numbers that can be extracted. Majority of them, especially the ones that are most important for you to really know how the profitability of your company or of your enterprise is doing, are here. There's about 10 of them here that I've put. And the reason why this is very important is also because those people or those entities that have given you the first funding, that first financing that they have put into your company or into your business, these are some of the things that they will be measuring on a month by month, on a quarter by quarter, and also on an annual basis, and even on a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year basis. And so it's important that every month, or even, as I said, every quarter, every year, these are the numbers that you will be almost checking There are formulas for each of these. All the formulas are generally available online, but I wanted to just highlight the ones that are most important as far as the performance of that money that they have put into your business, as far as how much is really performing, how it's really doing, and how successful it is. Because if they come basically, or as they usually say, if all hell breaks loose or things go bad, these are the sort of numbers that they'll come to look for, and to almost tell you that you are not doing well, or that you are losing their money, or that your business is not sustainable, or your business will fail. A few are most important, I think, that I've seen even with our own company, but also with other companies. As you know, one of the things we do in Tongston is that we also invest in people's companies, so in startups also. Not just startups, but also companies that have existed. And for us, these are the different metrics that we also look at when we're evaluating the profitability of a company. As you know, as I said, it's not just profitability that we look at. We look at the influence side of the company, or also the value side of the company. But when we're looking at its profitability, these are the sort of things we also look at. So we invest in companies, and we also look at these. I don't know. I mean, there is something that has just popped on the screen, but let me just continue. Hopefully it's not distracting the presentation. So yeah, as I said, let me just highlight some of the very important ones. Net cash flow is something that is of very importance. As they always say, cash flow is king. And net cash flow is something that, for me, is one of the most important ones, actually, that you should be mindful of. Some of these basically are as a result of other numbers that already exist here. So some lead to others, basically, but net cash flow is one of the very important ones. Return on equity is something that is very also key, especially if that funding, that first funding that you get or that you got is from entities that are not really in it for interest rates. So basically, people that have put money into the company for either ownership or also angel investors and certain interest, if I can call it that. So typically, your bank wouldn't be too much interested in this, although they know that equity, of course, is tied to whoever is owning the company, and so it will be something if they want to be of particular interest too. The other thing, which for speaking of banks, though, the one that they will really very much be interested in more than return on equity will be debt to equity ratio. Because typically banks, when they give you that funding, is mainly they give you for the sake of debt, not for the sake of equity. So that's why I said it depends on where you got that first funding or that first financing from. If it's an investor that wants shares in the company or in the business, then they will be mainly interested in the return on equity. For if it's an investor that is mainly interested in interest returns on interest rates that they'll be getting from you, then like a bank, basically they'll be more interested in the debt to equity ratio. Maybe let me conclude on this because I'm watching time. I know this is supposed to only be an hour long because also I need to answer some of the questions that I've been seeing popping up in the chat box. Is that one of the things that I always keep in mind, and even when starting up Tongston, and even now as we are, one of the things as an executive or as an owner of a company that is always at the back of my mind is what is the net worth of the company? or basically just like how every country thinks of what is the status of their economy or their GDP, or even as you as a person, when you think of how much is your net worth, or as I said, for the company, how much is if somebody was to come and ask for a share of the company or a stock in the company, even though you haven't listed, imagine you haven't even listed in the stock exchange, which is where most MSMEs are, because you have to reach a certain level to list on the stock exchange. But still, it's very important, it's very good and interesting to early enough, as much as possible, know what your worth is, what the worth of the company is, if it was to be listed, or if somebody was to come and ask for a share of the company, what is that stock value of the company? Because you never know, especially when you're looking for people that want to put money into the company for equity. This is kind of things that they'll be looking for. So it's always important to ask that question: what is the net worth of the company as of now, as of today? But as I said, that net worth is tied to some of these figures, but it's also tied to how much assets you have, and also the value of the longevity, what you have basically compared to the market, and also basically your stronghold as an entity. And so let me, I think, pause here for any questions. Before I hand over to Promise for any questions or anything, remember this: assets, liabilities, revenues, expenses, and cash flow. These are the 5 most important things as far as your profitability is concerned. And as I said, those are the ones that actually give birth to these figures. But even within these figures, the most important ones, as I said, net cash flow, return on equity, and then debt to equity ratio. But everything else is also important. But these 3 ones are very much important that you always need to keep monitoring on a month by month, on a quarterly basis, and on an annual basis. So let me pause here. And I think there are also, I mean, the accountants in the room can maybe mention this, and I think we have some finance people in the room, but I think there are a lot of tools, digital tools, and also softwares that most companies usually use right now. Like for us, we use QuickBooks in Tongston for our accounting, but also for the other aspects of financial modeling, it's just Excel basically. But I don't know if someday there will be an automated version of financial statements, and also a way of checking these indicators so that you know how this money that you've been given is really doing, or how it's performing. So Promise, let me stop here for any questions. I hope I'm trying to now think over my head whether I've actually said as much as I can. I think there's something I just remembered right now that I didn't say, which is that there's something called MVP, which is minimum viable product. One of the things, because I saw among your questions, you put something about goals, I think financial goals. What we try to do in Tongston, and also what many companies do, is that we try to categorize the products that we have, because remember, it's the products that will lead to profitability. So as much as you as a brand of influence is existing, it's products that you sell, it's the value that you sell that will lead to profitability. So what we try to do with the value or with the product side of things is that we make sure that there are products that are immediately ready to enter the market. So some of our training programs are like ready and quick to access basically by our customers. That doesn't mean that we're only going to focus on that, but we keep medium and also long-term goals. So, immediate or short-term products, medium products, and then long-term products. And reason why I say why this is very important is that many startups, when they get this first funding, they are always just trying to bank on one long-term product entering the market. before they can basically make money. But many financiers may not be as patient basically to start seeing revenue and cash flow coming into their companies or coming into the businesses that they have invested in, especially banks. So they don't have the time to wait for you to finish developing this cake or this new product or whatever it is in the next 6 months before they'll start seeing revenue. So that's why I said it's important. MVP exists, minimum viable product, something that is immediately ready to be deployed into the market. It should be ready while you are developing other catalogs of products that you have. So as I said, immediate or short-term, medium-term, and then long-term products. Each of these 3 categories of products will lead to immediate profitability, medium-term profitability, and long-term profitability. So the balance of the 2 is important to make sure you have. Otherwise, those financiers that are giving you this money, they'll feel a bit uncomfortable, and also you cannot bank on the future totally. Things happen, life happens. So immediate return is important from day one. You should have something that's almost ready to start creating revenue, which will indicate profitability. So let me just stop here, promise, and I'll hand over to you for any questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So much has been said and so much has been learned. Once again, please, if you have any questions, please go to the chat box and just put your questions there. But already we have 2 questions in the chat box. So the one says, please, what is the most effective way of building and leveraging on new network to grow in one's career? What is the most effective way building and leveraging on new network to grow in one's career?
Okay, so this is for, I guess this is for somebody who is an entrepreneur then, who is going to the entrepreneur route, not necessarily the business side of things. So for me, from my own experience, as far as network or career network is concerned, is right from the time I was young, I was always willing to do what they call free work. So what that made me do is basically doing as much as possible volunteering. I was also doing work that don't necessarily pays me the money that I would like to make. In fact, I always like to tell people that none of the jobs that I've done before actually gave me any financial benefit till when I set up Tongston. So the reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes people think that the benefit that you get in the workspace is just financial benefit, but no, that network that the person asked about, sometimes that is where the value is. And for you to even get that value, when you get into those systems, whether it's through volunteering or whatever it is, the same way that you're the same way that you think about it in the entrepreneurship route, improving value, profitability, and influence, is the same way you should think of it with your colleagues or with the organization that you are in. So if I, for instance, if I had gone into as a volunteer in maybe Zenith Bank, for instance, as a staff, 2 things will always be on my mind. So network-wise is, how do I help my team become more valuable, more influential, and more profitable? That is number 1, because everybody really wants that, because it's tied to each of our different needs, whether it's personally, professionally, or publicly. Number 2 is, how do I improve, or how do I help those colleagues of mine or those people that I meet? How do I help them improve the influence, the value, and the profitability of their own enterprise or their own work? Because if I do that for them, even if it's not for anything, then the more they see me of value, and the more they see me of value, the more they want me in their network. So you as a person also, you're actually almost like, you should also kind of see yourself as an enabler of value, influence, and profitability. Not just that is the business or a company. That way they value you the most. But as I said, it should be very much the person is that other person that you want to network with, whether it's your boss or another executive in another company that you're interested in joining or whatever thing it is. But as I said, mind you, some of it has to be almost like you being an enabler or a collaborator to what their own goal is concerned, even if it's free of charge. That's the way that they can actually buy into you and trust you to the level that they put you where you want to do. I always say, typically as a rule of life, you have to give before you ask. So give value as much as possible before you ask. Sometimes you don't even need to ask for it. The more you give value, the more you will, people would want to reciprocate. There's a rule of reciprocity that exists in psychology. So, but if I go into that, it will be a totally different topic. So let me stop it.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Yeah, it's about creating value. We have like 3 more questions here, but so one is, does Tongston provide courses with access to templates that can help us learn more about these key metrics of our business? Did you get that, sir?
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I got it. I think also I talked about earlier that the 3 arms of the TED model, meaning the value, profitability, and the influence side of things, each of them have different metrics and guides that you can key into, whether you are an entrepreneur, meaning you are an employee or job seeker or staff, or you are a business owner or a startup. These are things that you can actually get through. In fact, actually, I think all of our training programs, usually we provide those templates where people can just key into it and just plug in what their own interests are, their own careers, but also numbers that are tied to their own enterprise. Because some of us are probably interested in setting up a school, some of us are interested in setting up a restaurant, whatever idea it is that you have as an entrepreneur, but also as an entrepreneur, you can do the same thing for your organization. So any of our career and business advisory session trainings, any of our entrepreneurial education courses, and I think Tongston Ventures also has a consulting business development side of things. Yeah, so each of them have the templates, and we make it easy for you to make sense of your own business profitability wise. And it's something you can also do on your own, actually, when we give you that template. So yeah, and we do it based on what we're practicing in our own company and with other companies that we work with. Otherwise, then you can also, there are other means of getting this type of information from other sources also, but we think ours is really the right one because our model, the TED model, which is the value, influence, and profitability one, is something that we took so many years to really develop, and we have conceptualized it to so many different industries, even in government. Actually, something that can be applicable, the same template. So yeah, I don't know. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, that was very clear. So because of time, I'll just take one more question. So please, how do you control liability on assets, e.g. company vehicle maintenance? How do you control liability on assets? Yeah.
Yes, so company vehicle, for instance, let me use that example. Is sort of how even in personal finance, some people usually say your vehicle or your car is not really a liability, it's an asset because you need it to get to work, right? And when you get to work, that you can make the money. But the principle or the definition I always like to use, as I said, is that assets create your revenue, liabilities create expenses. So for something like a liability as is like a vehicle, for instance, one of the things that I see organizations doing now in a way that they can turn that liability of a vehicle into an asset is they use the vehicles as almost like a moving advertisement, almost like a moving billboard, if I can call it that. And this is something I think the few ones that I've seen here in Abuja. I don't know where each of you are, where all of you are located in, but in Abuja, I've seen something like that being done. And I've seen it also abroad, where the vehicles are almost like laminated with advertisement, they are not like banners, they are almost like, there's a way they make the bodies of the car to really carry products or companies or brands of other entities, basically. Some do it on top, like on the top of the vehicle, but the one for the top, I haven't seen it in Abuja yet. I've seen it in other parts of the world. So there's one way that a liability like a car people do use, and some other ways of using, because I'm trying to stay on the car, on the vehicle liability. Yeah, I think that is the best example that I've seen as far as a vehicle being a liability, being turned to an asset is concerned. But as I said, typically some people also look at vehicles as an asset because they use it to go to where they need the money that they are making, basically. But as I said, it's not a direct asset. You can say as it's an indirect asset because it doesn't directly.
Sorry, I dropped off a bit. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Engineer Bello. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hello?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's perhaps maybe let me use my position as the moderator to just ask one more question. And now, okay. And the question is, how do entrepreneurs, career people recognize this principle of asset and liabilities as entrepreneurs?
Sorry, can you say that again? I think okay, I lost you for a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go on.
So I was asking that how do entrepreneurs, career people, recognize assets and liabilities? How do we apply the principle of assets and liabilities as entrepreneurs? I don't know if you got to that question.
Okay. Yes. So you can apply it in two ways. You can apply it to yourself and also to the organization that you work for. Applying it to yourself means basically directly in your personal finance. So in your own personal life, what are the assets you have, the liabilities that you have? And these assets are like facilities like your house, and it can also be people like family and friends and stuff like that. So those can be the assets or liabilities. So you can apply it personally within your personal life, because remember, if you are an entrepreneur, the money that you make from your organization as salary will typically go into these things. So ideally, you should spend your salary on acquiring or maintaining more assets than liabilities, because the assets will lead to more revenue and the liabilities will lead to more expenses. That is one, applying it personally. The second way to apply it is for your organization. If you can become more of an asset than a liability to your organization, the more valuable you are, the more you will get promotions, the more you will get that job, and the more you will be of interest to the owners of the organization, to your manager and all that. So even if it's not directly linked to your role in the organization, if you are thinking like the owner of the business, which is basically what you are as an entrepreneur, you are thinking of the owner of the business or the board members, and you're thinking of, okay, how can this company, Zenith Bank, for instance, how can it have more assets than liabilities? How can I enrich the current assets that it has and the current and also reduce the current liabilities that it has? How can I do all of that? Then basically, the more you enable profitability for that organization that you're working for. So these are the two ways you can apply assets and liabilities or etc. to yourself if you are an entrepreneur, an employee.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much information here. So again, for those who joined us in last session, we shared the link to the video. We also intend to share the video and the link to the video, this particular conversation with you, so that you can go over it over and over again, because there was so much like he talked about. But please, to have access to that video, a survey will pop. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
go on. Hmm?
Okay, so a survey will come, will pop out immediately you end the call on your browser. Please fill that survey. On submission, we would send you the link to this video and other information. Mr. Bello, we are really grateful for your time. Thank you so much. Just a few more minutes, I want to talk about a very important opportunity, which is Tongston Entrepreneur Education Summit 2022, coming to you on the 1st to 3rd of September. It is a rare opportunity for you. Now, in the beginning of this webinar, I talked about entrepreneurial education and how we can all leverage it, even as business owners, as career people, as people working in the public or private sector. So this is an opportunity for you to see firsthand how entrepreneurial education can drive personal enterprise business development. So it is a place to be. During the fees, we are going to be having a lot of events. There will be an elevator speech for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, an opportunity for you to pitch yourself, sell your business idea. And there'll be awards and recognition, and prizes worth thousands of dollars. Links will be shared in the chat box and email that will come afterwards. So please click on the mail, on the links to get more information. Every entrepreneur, every business owner should be on Tongston Thinkers Network. This is a place where Tongston is people driven. We are impact driven. It is all about the impact we give. So it's a place where we try as much as possible our best to give the resources you need as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, for your personal and your business development. We give a lot of resources. We do games, we read books, and provide all the resources that you would need for your personal development and the development of your enterprise. And very important is Tongston Entrepreneurial Thinking Podcast with Engineer Bello, our speaker for today, and many other guests, where they talk about nuggets and things that you do need for your personal enterprise and business development. So you want to be part of it. Every Friday at 7 p.m. it is released to you. The links will be shared in the chat box. It will also be in the email. Please click on these things. Remember, one of those things that was said last week is nothing just drops on our lap. So we have to do some work to actually get there. So one of those things you need to do right now is click on these links to get those resources. And finally, this is not the end of the webinar. While we are ending this part, we are ending the webinar. There's another part to this webinar. Well, sorry. Excuse me. So yeah, so there's another part to the webinar. We'll be talking about important parts about gaining financial aid to further your education. We'll be talking about a lot of things you need to know about furthering your education and gaining the financial aid you need. Every one of us need entrepreneurial education. I believe you now agree with me that you need entrepreneurial education. So how do you get the fund? To take us that day, our speaker will be Mrs. Tolani Olawore. She's the community manager at Opportunity Desk. She's a storyteller, a content strategist, and community manager. She's also a crypto educator. I'm trusting that you would register, because the link to register will also be shared with you immediately after now. Please do not forget that as soon as you end this call, a survey will pop up. Please fill it and submit it. It's on submission that you will get access to the video, this video and the previous one for those who are joining us for the first time. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Mr. Bello, Edina Bello. Thank you, everyone. We have come to the end of the webinar today. Thank you so much. We could just go to the chat box and just say hi, bye to one another, and then thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prince. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone.